Welcome to the Autistic Delicatessen.
What you eat, what you drink is your story.
The Autistic Delicatessen.
Let me tell you something. The food is great.
What you eat, what you drink is your story.
The Autistic Delicatessen.
Welcome to another edition of the Autistic Delicatessen, episode 3. I'm your host, Larnell, along with my co-host, Onikagi.
This is the video segment where we love to have more guests in a video format just to create more variety.
So definitely continue checking us out though. Very nice stuff coming up. Today's guest is Starex Smith, aka The Hungry Black Man, a food blogger, cook, and entrepreneur. His blog provides various content with some reviews and promotions, including vegan restaurants and even soul food. Due to COVID-19, Starex has recently launched Ghost Kitchen, a food delivery service which is pickup or delivery only, providing delicious food during these tough times, including fried chicken and waffles.
The food is great.
So, Starex, welcome to the Autistic Delicatessen.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm good as well.
Yeah. So, tell us, Starex, how did you first get started with the whole Hungry Black Man food blog?
So almost 4 years now, to approaching July actually is when we started. July makes our 4th year. I was at a dinner meeting with some friends and business partners, and we ended up going to a place, Sabor Peruvian, over in Miami. And unfortunately, we had a really bad experience where the staff of the restaurant racially profiled us and subsequently resulted in us not receiving service at the time that we sat down. And we sat there for almost 20 minutes, and they were passing us by, serving other people, and we protested and said, hey, what's the problem? And the server was just so rude and disrespectful, and so we ended up leaving because of that experience. And I just remember being in Starbucks and asking myself, is this the sort of culinary ecosystem that South Florida deserves? And we don't. It wasn't something that I would want anyone to experience. And so I wanted to create something where we could curate, food and drink experiences that was without the racism. And so that meant focusing on Black-owned restaurants. That meant focusing on women-owned restaurants. That meant focusing on other minority-owned restaurants that were a lot more acquiescent to diversity and diverse, clienteles and diverse palates. And so I think that being a Peruvian restaurant was actually really unfortunate, given the fact that that's an ethnic eats. And I guess the reason behind really getting it started was to economically protest that treatment that we received. And so as a result, we started reviewing Black-owned restaurants all around the country. We started in South Florida, and the passion just kind of grew based on us just seeing this sort of repetitive circumstance of racist dining. And so we called it Dining While Black, and that was how it got started, really.
Yeah. Something good right there.
You do other activities such as fundraising. Could you explain your activities other than blogging?
Sure. So the Hungry Black Man blog that's how the blog got started. But as far as our social action activities, we, and I say we again, because the same friends I was having dinner with are my partners with Black Tech Week, Felicia and Derek, Pearson Hatcher. We started a nonprofit initiative within Code Fever that was focusing on diminishing innovation deserts, right? A lot of spaces in Miami-Dade County, specifically South Florida, Black communities lack a lot of innovation and technology and tech enablement. And so we wanted to make sure that those communities were not left out of the innovation space. And so we started to do a lot of activities in that area But my background, I had left, government, and I was in different executive positions there. I was a director of Parks and Recreation for the city of Miami Gardens. So I was Ron from Parks and Rec. But but yeah, so coming from there and seeing all of the opportunities for our youth that needed to happen in the private sector, that was something that I left with, right? Like I left with remembering the holes that government didn't fill. And so I wanted to fill those holes. And so I wanted to do that using the knowledge that we had with Black Tech Week and Cold Fever and the experience that we had there. And then it just kind of spiraled, So looking at disparities in one area, you start kind of pulling the string and the shirt becomes unraveled. So we just start seeing a huge amount of need in our community. And the fact that many of these funders was really funding opportunity and not need. And that's a big problem because in order to many times to manifest an opportunity, you have to meet, your needs. And so how we met the needs of the children that we worked with was based off a number of experiences, right? So we ended up having a situation where we were robbed. We had a situation where a kid was attacked. We had situations where kids were shot and killed, and this was happening around us. And so we were looking for nonprofits and different entities to do something about it. And we just saw routinely like no one was doing anything. So it just naturally, fell on our shoulders, and we were just like, look, we can't do nothing. And so I realized that I had a platform and that I would be able to do some interventions, and it just spiraled. So we started raising money. It was a young kid, a young little baby. Was he even two? He was two or three years old, and his father was shot and killed, and his father was holding him, and that trauma with this little baby, we raised $9,000 for the mother, and that was one of our first real, this was about 4 years ago as well, one of our first real social sort of activist sort of things to do, and it didn't we didn't call the newspaper. We don't do that, right? We don't do any of that. Like, look at what we're doing. We share it on our platform, and I do a live, and that's it. And so we raised money for that child. And then I told myself that any Black child that gets murdered or shot, that we were going to make sure that we wrapped our arms around the family and to show the family compassion, because that was another thing that was lacking in our communities. It was like compassion and humanizing, right? Like looking at our communities as the Black suffering falls on deaf ears, because it's almost like that's your position in the social order. Like you should suffer. So, when you see Black suffering, it's kind of like, whatever, because there's always going to be something going on with them. And so that's how we ended up being in that space. So like from Tammy Jackson, having her daughter on a prison floor, to Dima Loving over in down south being attacked by the cop, to the young lady in Orlando who was attacked by this deranged man in a McDonald's. And we went and drove and gave her some cash and flowers. And that those acts of kindness and acts of compassion, they go so far. I know it may seem like just gestures because, they're going to spend the money, but that, for instance, the $9,000, the mother of that child talked about how that 9,000 went to really saving her financial life, that she was on the lease of the deceased. And so she was responsible for paying that car note. There was a rent payment that was due, and she couldn't go to work because she was taking care of the little baby. And so the money literally came right on time. And so when we saw the impact of that, we just kept going. So we did Bahamian fundraisers. We raised $6,000, $6,500 for the Bahamas. And we did that like 2 days, after the storm hit, we got it together and we were rolling. We raised money for the young man who was shot and killed, a football player, and we raised about $4,000 for his mother. And we do that because it's just so important for us to keep showing the compassion in our communities so that hopefully it catches on.
Yeah.
Wow. Definitely something to think about as well. It's pretty much not I pretty much not have lost words basically. But it's good awareness as well, especially for Black communities and Black businesses. A person, obviously, I can't really say much as a white person, but I do think it definitely needs more attention, and I respect all communities out there. So, and all the fundraising and things that you do, Starex, I do respect and appreciate. But and also in a positive note, I do love your blog works and your pictures and all the food photos do make me hungry.
As far as like the blog is concerned, we have about 200 something thousand subscribers nationwide to the blog. So we don't really do a good job at marketing. That was all organic. I just never had like an ad where we were like, hey, join my blog. I mean, we would boost an article for $10 on a different business, because that was the whole idea. How do we like corral the customers? Looking at how media, I mean, because we incorporated the Hungry Black Man as a media company, because we realized that media was what was lacking when it came to all of the minorities that were underrepresented within the food space, right? And so it's not just a Black problem, it's a woman problem, it's a Arab problem, it's an Asian problem. Like in food and drink, unfortunately, it is a predominantly white male dominated space. And so when you think about your favorite meals, it really came from the hands of a woman. But when you think about the term chef, you immediately think of a man. You do not think you just it doesn't. The same way that it took years for folks to get comfortable with seeing Black doctors and Black lawyers and Black architects and Black engineers and Black computer programmers, and so when you now hear that term and you can kind of see like, oh, there can be a woman there, can be a Black person there, and you don't feel that sort of like resentment. Well, I'm sure people still do, but not like it used to be, right? So it's the same thing when in the kitchen. Like it's hard for women to be that sort of driving force, directing, in the back of the house in a very male dominated space, right? And so how now when you have chefs like Chef DJ DeBrania Hodges, DJ Khaled's former chef, or Chef Amaris Jones, the former owner of South Street, and Rick Ross's chef, and Chef Michelle Bernstein, who's made it through the mold over and had a great little spot, Mishy's, but she recently transitioned to more of a freelancer. And so Chef Frederick Berg over at the Big Easy in the Brickell area, these women chefs that are doing great things, how do we highlight them and how do we celebrate them the same way that we want to highlight and celebrate Black entrepreneurs in the food and drink space? And so the blog allowed for me to highlight these folks and boost it all over the country. And so when I realized that was the potentiality, as I was a grant writer. So I was like, if I can write a grant, I can write about food. And so I took a couple creative writing courses, took a couple wine tasting and got a couple certifications in different food areas because I wanted to be intelligent on what I was talking about. I've always had a passion for food, but it was on an anecdotal novice sort of space. And I wanted to make sure that when I start writing, because I've written for Detroit Hour Magazine, I've written for the Herald, I've written for different publications as in the area of food. So I wanted to make sure that becoming a food writer and a blogger, I wanted to know what the hell I was talking about. So media was something that I felt would really drive this ecosystem to the point where people would start to respect it. And I think we've done a good job locally, especially, right? And locally and in Detroit, we did so well in Detroit that Airbnb made us Detroit's tastemaker. So if you stay in an Airbnb in Detroit, my face pops up on an app, Detroit app, and I'm like directing you where to go eat. And all of those restaurants were minority-owned restaurants, predominantly Black-owned restaurants, women-owned restaurants, Chaldean-owned restaurants. They have a big Chaldean population there. And for those of you who don't know, the Chaldean people are Christian Iraqis. And so that was a a really amazing experience. And so, yeah, so the company being a media company, now I'm in the process of saying to myself, how can I become sort of like the Black Food Network, you know? And that's my ultimate goal. So I'm home now, master planning. And so this interview actually has been put off so long because it's just, I'm one person, and it's just been so hard for me to sit down, right? And so like today, I had to shoot down to Tribe because we had an activation going on there, and I was so upset because I didn't text Larnell. It just completely slipped my mind. So yeah, so being, so that's the goal with this whole thing. I'm trying to really build something that lasts longer than all of us, you know?
Yeah. And really, like, Starex, I gotta just say, like, from one black person to another, I know, like, we are, all different and all that stuff. I just say, like, I definitely appreciate what you're doing for the community and just for, like, food in general and all that stuff. Like, definitely something to, like, look up to and inspire right there, to show that black people are not monoliths when it comes to food and all that stuff and stereotypes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And on that, you also created the Ghost Kitchen, due to, like, of course, this current COVID-19 crisis. And of course, like, you got small businesses and even like some black owned businesses, some that are just running into trouble though. So what got you to start that?
So when this COVID thing happened, I have generalized anxiety disorder, which sucks because that is the last thing that a black man needs, is a disorder where you're even more fearful. So my sometimes has these spikes, and so for me, when the pandemic happened, of course the anxiety set off, and I started thinking about food scarcity, immediately. Like, and it was funny because you can watch the live that I did, like, I'm talking over like almost 2 months ago. And that's what I was talking about. Like, it's going to be food scarcity. This thing is going to have a domino effect. I don't know why people were taking it lightly. And I started talking about how it was going to ravage our communities, specifically because of our pre-existing conditions. And so I was like, okay, well, food is at the source of most of Black health issues, right? So because of that, we know, you look at continental Africans, and like, they live forever if they don't die from some external thing, right? So like, how do you get Black people to eat better during this time that they're home all day? So initially we were like, let's put out recipes that people can make every day, right? And so like, we realized that, like, no, people aren't going to do that because they, like, if I have the disposable income and I go to the store, or those workers who lost their jobs and they receive food stamps, they're going for the junk food. So I was in the supermarket, literally buying the stuff that I was going to buy for the sort of recipe cards we were going to share, and we hadn't even gotten off the ground yet. And as I was in line, I saw this mother, and she had about 4 kids with her, and her shopping cart was just full with just, my God, I mean, the little Debbie snacks, Doritos, Chips Ahoy, sodas. I mean, just everything that you can think of that you shouldn't eat, she had in that cart, and it was properly rolled. And I just sat there, and I was like, man, like this, we got to figure out how to do an intervention for this. So when I got home, I started cooking, and I was just like, even if you want to eat unhealthy, make the unhealthy food, right? So like, you're still coming out way better. If you want a cookie, make your own cookie, right? Because once you put these ingredients, you're taking out all those fillers, all of those like substances and just synthetic crap. So I said to myself, you know what? Let me do that, right? Let me make whole food for a group of people who want to eat clean during the pandemic and they can't cook, or they want, so we created family meals. And I bought all these organic chickens. I found this halal farmer that delivers to this local Indian store over in North Miami Beach. And so his chicken was organic, his chicken was halal. There's a Jewish market that made all this incredible, just all sorts of stuff that I was sourcing from. So I told myself, I said, you know what? Let me make all organic meals. I found a company that provided pasture-raised pigs. And so I just went crazy kind of with like eating organic and like making it affordable. And so I wanted to create that. And so I got a little space, a little co-working space kitchen, and I start cooking out of there. And we just start making really wholesome meals, like with the organic chicken, organic or wild caught fish. And it went well. And so folks started to buy it, and they put in their orders, and we were selling like 4 to 6 family meals. And that was a really good feeling, knowing that they're getting organic chicken, they're getting sweet potatoes, they're getting asparagus, and these are all farm to table style meals, because we were driving to Homestead because we saw that the farmers were losing money, and they were doing sort of direct, like you can just go there and buy it, and they had these big fields. We went one day and they had mountains of zucchini, mountains of squash, mountains of green beans, unfortunately just sitting there because they dumped it because there was no buyers, because everything's closed. And so we went and just like racked up on zucchini, squash, and beans, green beans, and we just saw that whole food and organic food, it tastes better. You don't feel bloated. It's healthy, and it was something that I felt would make a lot of sense. So from seeing the mother and her kids, and that's just knowing that, hey, what can I do during this time to make families' lives easier who would like to eat healthy, and how can I make it affordable? That's really how we got started.
And really, when you go to like the Instagram, like if you live in the South Florida area, in Miami in particular, and just look at the stuff that you make, like the organic meatballs and all, and of course, like in the intro part, I mentioned about fried chicken and waffles and all that stuff. Because really, like Star, to be honest with you, like I really saw it as more of like a West Coast thing, because the first time I heard about chicken and waffles was really from Roscoe's and all that stuff, or just from like the more West Coast rap videos, though. So
yeah, I mean, I think so the menu selection is a healthy dosage of fun items and naughty items, and then obviously the whole foods. We had to add those the chicken and waffles and all those things because folks were asking for them, and I was like, you know what, if I can fry your chicken in canola or olive oil and make your waffle from spelt flour, and like they don't even know that they're eating like healthier, naughty food, right? Like their syrup is agave, like, and
agave,
I hope that no one's that eat like it's. I jazz up the agave, and they don't know the difference. I mean, I just tell them like, oh, it's like really, really cool syrup, but it's really a jazzed up agave. And so we saw that, like the noodles, right? I mean, the pasta. The pasta is organic and it's homemade. There's an Italian market in North Miami Beach that just went out of business, but the lady that worked there, she makes her own pasta from scratch. So I get my spaghetti, my fettuccine, my pesto. I get all that from her. Pretty much everything we make is like artisanal. So even the sauce, I make the sauce from scratch. I go get the carrots, the celery, the tomatoes, the wine, the garlic.
My co-host Onikagi really likes pasta, so she's really liking this right now. So
I do, yeah.
So and hearing her accent, I assume that she's from Europe, and so I know that when visiting Europe, and I'm not a fan of the English or the like Great Britain or the UK's food, but I am a fan of the French. I love Paris. I mean, I love the food there. And I do think that Europe, I think that England, for me, the thing that I love the most was the Indian food. Like the Indian food in England is amazing. It's so amazing. And so
the UK has good takeaways.
and Edinburgh, I'm still trying to this day to find someone who can make a pot pie the way that we had that pot pie in Edinburgh. I mean, it was incredible. But and maybe I haven't had a shepherd's pie when I was in Europe. I didn't have a shepherd pie, but I should have. But yeah, so I'm a fan of every type of cuisine. But my top cuisine, I have top 3. But I'm a fan of like the world's food.
No, it's good to hear that an outsider's point of view. Food buckets not always a great reputation, but when it comes to French food. That's like that's like the Bible of food. Everyone follows like French ways, like the whole mirepoix thing, carrots, onion, celery rule, and also and that such. But when it comes to the UK, takeaways rule in the UK, and I'm from Scotland, so I'm quite used to the whole takeaway culture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been to Edinburgh. I visited Edinburgh.
Yeah, Edinburgh is pretty cool. Although I think I prefer Glasgow myself.
Oh, I didn't go to Glasgow. I just remember my most memorable thing in Edinburgh was seeing a cathedral converted into a nightclub. And as an American, as a black American, I was like, oh my God, I was raised in the church, and I was like, man, these guys are innovative.
Yeah, we're quite good at converting old churches to either clubs or even house apartments, flats. So we try not to waste buildings unless they're beyond repair. So
That's smart. That's smart.
speaking of clubs, instead of food, what's considered your favorite drink?
I'm a fan of so many different spirits, but my number one spirit would be gin. And my favorite gin is a gin by the name of Monkey 47. It's a German gin from the Black Forest. It's casted in these it's delicious. It's my favorite gin. I would then say number two would probably be, I want to say the 15-year Macallan. So the 15-year Macallan, the Scotch, would be my second. My third, I'm just talking about what I usually just buy. Like those are the top two that I buy when I do drink. And then number three, I just love gin. It's so many gins that I like. I would say number three would be I want to say this is an English gin, and it's called Bloom. If you've never had it, you would absolutely love it. Bloom gin is just so amazing because the botanicals, obviously juniper is going to be the most pronounced in most of them, but I really like the cucumber notes from Hendrix. So Hendrix would be up there as well. I mean Hendrix gin is just it's just my go-to. It is my absolute go-to. You can make so many great cocktails from Hendrix that just, I mean, floral notes. That's, for me, I'm all about floral and botanicals and herbal tasting cocktails. I'm not a fan on like heavily sweetened things, but I do like the citrus in my cocktails. So you'll find me shaking up Hendrix like the most, right? Like, so when I am on my drinking, I'll take some months off. But when I'm drinking, I'm on it. I'm on it. But yeah, those would be my top three. But my favorite, so if I had to pick an absolute favorite drink, it would definitely be Hendrix.
So I'm speaking of drinks, Starex. I remember the first time I met you was actually at the Soul Vegan festival,
Okay.
that was in Miramar in the past. And I remember you had all these different black vegan food businesses out there, vendors.
Yeah.
And along with that, you had your own stand and you had these berry fruit punches,
Yes.
that you had selling. And I had one of them and it was actually good, if you ever want to try one of Starbucks things, that's one of the things to try right there. That is really good, So I'm just wondering, along with making food yourself, have you always made your own drinks?
I have. I remember being very young. I'm Black American, so my family's actually from Georgia, and my dad's family's from Georgia, and my mom's family is from Ohio and New York. Those are the two, but I'm Miami native.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Technically, I was born coming back from Atlanta. I was born in a small town called Tipton, Georgia. But literally on the way back to Miami, I came out in Georgia. But I grew up, in Miami. Growing up in Miami, I didn't have a lot. It's funny, right? Like, I remember seeing other cultures within the Black diaspora, but it was so interesting because if you were Black but you weren't American when I was a kid, I I felt that you were foreign, and I didn't understand, a lot of stuff I didn't understand. And so when I was very young, I had this friend named Sanjeev. He was black, but he was from Trinidad. And I want to say he had like Indian in him as well, because it's like the name Sanjeev. So his people, they used to make these really amazing drinks, like tamarind and pineapple ginger, and all of those like Jamaican style, even though they were from Trinidad, but they would make these Jamaican style natural juices. Everything was like natural juices. And I would drink them. Like his mom, she was amazing, and she would just make these juices. And I would just be like, my God, these things are delicious. And so, of course, I got older. And when I got older, I remember like, damn, I remember having these amazing juices from Sanjeev's mom. How can I make that myself? So I started playing around with it, and I started juicing, making natural juices, and then experimenting with putting this with this and that flavors that I just liked. And so, like I was sharing with you with the gin, I'm a Sigma, so I pledged Sigma, and we used to have these big parties, and I was the brewmaster, so my job was to make the drinks for the party, and we had this thing called blue juice. And so blue juice, some guys make it, they'll use like things to make it blue, like Kool-Aid or just like artificial stuff and food coloring. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want my juice to be like Sanjeev's mom. How do I get these blueberries to work with me? And so I started like playing around with blueberries and lemons. And so I did this blueberry lemonade, and that was the base of the blue juice. And so that blueberry lemonade was a hit. People were like, damn, this is the best blue juice ever. So I just kept making that. And then when I went and started the Hungry Black Man at the Vegan Fest, I remember this is how it all came about. I was like, damn, we need a drink vendor. And we couldn't find a drink vendor that wasn't making just very ubiquitous drinks. I didn't want like just this thing. They had the standard drinks, So I was like, I don't want that. I want this. And I don't want it sweetened with this, like, processed sugar. Like, well, it's all processed. But I didn't want it, just use sugar cane. But anyway, I was like, I don't want to use that. I want to use, like, fresh ingredients. So I ended up, for that week, recreating Sanjeev's mom's juices. And I like berries because I like gin. So I use berries in the place of certain fruits, certain melons rather, and we just kept playing with it. And so we sweetened it with agave. We sweetened it with sugarcane. We sweetened it with agave, sugarcane, and what was the last thing? I want to say we might have used some brown sugar in there. And that was how it came about. And then we fizzed it with some ginger kombucha, and that was that's how we created those. Yeah, it was delicious. Now you got me wanting to make it. It was delicious. It really was.
That's making me thirsty, man. about a tea anyway.
Yeah, I'm drinking my bubbly.
But now when you said the ginger kombucha,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Starex, man, like we really appreciate this like conversation with you on food and all that stuff. So in order for people to check out your reviews as well as your blog, they go on to thehungryblackman.com, right?
Yes.
If you're in the South Florida area, please check out his ghost kitchen, and again, like kudos to you for having something like that to be able to have that in service.
No, thank you.
So, Starex, we'd like to thank you so much for being on the Autistic Delicatessen and really just sharing us with food, experience, and, of course, Black culture.
Thank you guys for having me.
Something the food is great.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this edition of the Autistic Delicatessen. If you want to check out more of what we got, please go on to the autisticdelicatessen.card.co. It's right at the bottom, so you'll be able to find it there.
If you enjoyed this content, feel free to subscribe for future videos. Until next time.
What you eat and what you drink is your story.